Wales, I think, has got a very special thing for me because when I first came here, I felt very different from having lived in London for 25 years after we came over from South Africa, unwillingly, by the way, to London as exiles. My parents didn't choose to do this, they were forced to. And I felt a sense of community, a sense of family values, a sense of joy and warmth amongst people that I hadn't really experienced in England. And that made me feel much more at home, and also the love of sport. I was brought up as a sports fanatic: football, rugby, cricket, motor racing, and you find that part of the culture. And I really enjoy being here and walking the valleys, as well as the Neath Valley is one of the undiscovered sort of wonderful places in which to walk and explore. The waterfalls at the top of the valley at Neath Vaughan, the old industrial heritage. You come across a gunpowder mine, a quarry. You come across old mines. You come across really interesting bits of the industrial archaeology, if you like, of 19th and 20th century Wales in this area. And there's also a lot of culture. There's a lot of commitment to local arts and performing arts, which is very, very, I think, admirable in every way. Maybe that is the case, that I came as an outsider, became an insider, but not quite one of the inside sort of establishment circles. And I think that's very true for a lot of people in Wales who are born in Wales, unlike me, and then maybe went to work in London or whatever role they played in their lives, don't actually feel necessarily absolutely part of the inner core of Britain, which in some respects means England. And so there is, I think, something I can identify with and feel part of. But I don't feel uncomfortable in this role or where I found myself. I just probably see things a little differently. I found that in government, and I explain that in the book, in the memoirs. And probably the way I see Wales is slightly different from people who are brought up here, because I can see Wales for its fantastic possibilities and its strengths and its values, which above all what attract me to living here and being part of Wales. But at the same time, I look at Wales in a global way, because I come from an international background, and there are far too many people in Wales, including in politics in Wales, not just in the Assembly but more broadly, who look at Wales in a very parochial way. This is my village, this is my community, this is my town, this is my country. And I do that as well, but I also think, well, Wales is an important nation, but as part of a world of 7 billion people. And we have to think big, and if I have criticisms of public life in Wales, is that it doesn't think big enough. And when we think big, as we saw in the sporting context in the Rugby World Cup, we can achieve great things. But you've got to look outwards, not inwards. And that's the way I suppose I see it more than perhaps others. I feel very accepted, and I have always a great welcome and response from people wherever I go. That's not to say I don't have my enemies. In politics you make enemies. That's in the nature of it. But I don't choose to go and make enemies. I've always expressed my views because they're very firmly held and reflect my principles. I tend to express my views very strongly, although by nature I'm quite a polite and personable person. If people are decent to me, I'm decent to them. If they pick a fight with me, I stand my ground. The Neath economy is going through a really tough time. The retail sector, the shops, the businesses in Neath Town Centre are really finding life very, very difficult. And then you've got, of course, this massive change we've just had in the Neath Valley. Only within the last year, the closure of the biggest employer, TRW, a global company, shipping their production mostly to Eastern Europe. And that was a big struggle, and that's been a big blow to the Neath economy because they were highly paid jobs. On the other hand, you've got mining expanding. You've got two very modern, high technology mines in Upper Pergram and a Unity mine across the other side of the Neath Valley, both within, as it were, half a mile of each other. And they're expanding, they're recruiting. And there's a demand for anthracite, black gold, which is mined in these valleys. And so I think there's a future for mining. But be in no doubt, the Neath economy, against the background of the current Westminster government's economic policies and the global situation, is in very difficult circumstances. And one of the things that upsets me most about this is the lack of opportunity for young people. They are really facing a dreadful scenario at the moment. Well, I'm never somebody who wants to preach pessimism. I'm by nature an optimist in every sense. But I think this is going to be a tough time for years to come, because there is no demand in the economy. I'm not going to get party political, but the truth is, this government in Westminster is pursuing exactly the mistaken policies that were pursued in the 1930s, that John Maynard Keynes, the great liberal economist as it happened, who'd be turning in his grave at what his descendants are doing in government at the moment. What they've done, this government, is exactly what happened in the 30s. You suck demand out of the economy, you don't invest as a government, and therefore the private business sector cannot take up the slack because there's no economic activity. And so I think what we're going to do is bump along. I don't think it'll be, I hope not, a terrible depression as happened in the 1930s, but I do think it's going to be tough for quite a long time. And the Neath economy is quite fragile. We're an economy which has been in transition now for 20 and more years, with the collapse of mining on a big scale and traditional heavy industry, manufacturing, BP, oil and gas is very big in this area, and that's all pretty well gone. And so small businesses have taken their place, and supplier businesses to some of the big contractors and factories. But they're getting no support from the banks. They're getting very little support from government, although the Welsh government is doing its best to plug gaps, but it's facing a declining budget. So I don't think the outlook is anything other than extremely difficult. My advice always to young people in the Neath area, and I speak to a lot of schools and do question and answer sessions around the community, is you've got to get the skills. Whatever they are, it might be the best electrician, it might be the best musician, it might be the best brain surgeon, it might be the best teacher or nurse, but you've got to have high skills. And I always talk about going to China and India. I went to India as Secretary of State, and there I discovered there are 7 institutes of technology, and they recruit postgraduates. And in one instance, I remember they're recruiting 500 postgraduates in science and technology and computing and engineering, 500 graduates from 3,000 who sit an exam, from 300,000 who applied to sit the exam. That's just one of these 7 institutes of technology in India. Now, you can't compete against the emerging giants of the world, China and India, and China's much the same, from an area like Neath or Wales, unless you are producing absolutely top quality people with the skills, whatever those are. And so that's my message to young people, is get the skills, because this is very different from our fathers' generation, our parents' generation, or our grandparents' generation, who could go into jobs without having any skills. Today, it's education, 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 and there isn't any shortcut to that.